Welcome to Pros and Cons, the podcast where I talk to people about their personal and professional stories and uncover the different ways and common themes of resonating with an audience. Because after all, communication is essentially storytelling. Today, I'm here in Basel for BioTechX Europe. I've talked to some startup companies about their journey in creating a biotech company from scratch and what things they think are important to communicate their offering to their potential audiences. So let's go meet them. Okay, so I'm here with Rick from Helical. So tell me who you are and your co-founders and what your company does.
Yeah, so my name is Rick. As you mentioned, I'm the co-founder and CEO of Helical with two co-founders, Maxim, really on the AI side, and Mathieu on the bio and pharma side. And basically, Helical is an AI platform for pharma companies, and our agentic workflows help pharma companies to leverage so-called biofoundation models, so DNA and RNA sequencing models in their drug discovery processes. So our agentic workflows basically help them to address use cases in patient stratification, biomarker discovery, target identification. And we actually have an open core approach. So we have a GitHub. So I would encourage everybody to check it out and see what's out there that you can already use.
Brilliant. And what has your journey to starting up a biotech startup been like? How did you get here?
So actually, we know each other since roughly 50 years, Maxim, Mathieu, and myself. I always wanted to do medicine, ended up last second doing engineering. So Maxim and I really come from the engineering background. That's why we're also very AI infused in what we do. And Mathieu brought us back to the good side of things, he being a medical doctor and genomics researcher. And about 12 months ago, we looked into those biofoundation models. We saw the potential that it has for changing the way AI is done in pharma. And so we started talking to pharma companies, and we saw, while having those discussions, wow, they really see the promises in those models, but it's really difficult to use those models. Which AI infrastructure should I use? Which model should I actually use? There are hundreds out there. And basically, how do I go from those models to actual use cases in drug discovery? That's all not straightforward. And by signing our first big pharma company, a customer, we were really convinced that this is the right path to take. So we started Helical. We raised our pre-seed or seed funding round, call it as one. We raised 3 million euros.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. So now we're up and running. We're a team of 10 very talented engineers, bio researchers, and AI researchers. And now we're really scaling up the product and start working with more and more partners.
Brilliant. And so I guess now you're scaling up. What are your different communication priorities for different stakeholders?
Yeah, it's actually a tricky one. So if you think internally at Helical, then I would say you really have to bridge the gap between the AI teams and the bio teams, because it's two different worlds colliding together. And I think that's the future of where drug discovery is headed. So if we don't align communication there, we will lose information in that passage, and we will not get the best product out of that. So that is internally, and I would say externally, I think it's really important to show the potential of those biofoundation models, why they are intrinsically different than what you have seen in more traditional AI for bio, and why they mark really the shifting points for AI in drug discovery. And hence it's important to invest in this now, because I think 10 years from now, you will think back to that moment and really see, okay, that was like the pivotal moment where AI started to have like more of a really strong impact on drug discovery. And I think this type of models, those transformers, but really in DNA and RNA type of modalities are that paradigm shift.
Absolutely. So how old is the company?
About 12 months.
Oh, okay. Well, super new. So you've done a lot in 12 months. So
Really true.
so what's been your biggest challenges so far, would you say?
There are obviously quite a few, but
Yeah.
one, and of course, maybe back to communication, is that those biofoundation models are a new type of algorithms. So there's not much wet lab validation out there as of now. And yet there are those benchmarks showing that they have that intrinsic understanding of your DNA and can intrinsically understand not only correlation from disease and factors that drive it, such as gene expression and others, but that they have really a strong understanding of what are the causal relationships here. And yet, since that proof is not out there, I think we have to constantly communicate on the potential of them to convince our customers to work with us. And the validation is only going to come from those projects. We are not a data company. We do not gather our own data. So that I would say is a big challenge of getting customers to do that first leap of faith.
Yep. So year 6, what does Helical look like? Where do you want the company to be?
That's a good one. But we have an open core approach. So I really would like to have the biggest open source community in AI for pharma. And I think that is definitely possible, again, to the paradigm shift in technology, but also to the fact that open source is not such a common approach for pharma, and we really want to build it. We think that AI needs to be democratized. So I really want to have the biggest open source community out there. And on the customer side, I really hope that our agentic workflows can generate new insights that lead to later stage candidates as well in drug discovery. And if we can be part of that journey, that will be really fun.
Brilliant. So you guys are super new, but you're a co-founder. So what advice do you have for other people maybe considering starting a biotech startup?
Yeah, I mean, again, we are quite new, so I didn't want to pretend I have everything figured out. What I can say on the fundraising side, though, is be sure that you go somewhere where the market can be potentially very large. Yeah, and if you can show that you can be the right team to go there, I think we will have the capacity to raise money. And I think raising money is an important milestone in accelerating the growth of your company. It is a more aggressive strategy, but I still would recommend it as a strategy because it simply allows you to have more impact at a higher risk, but more impact.
Brilliant. And my final question for you, what is your top tip for effective communication?
Oof. Yeah, and I would say know your audience, which especially in what we do is not that easy, but by understanding who your audience is, try to adjust whatever you're telling them to from non-technical users to like deep AI experts. In our case, we need to be able to adjust that pitch to all level of expertise because we need to convince a whole chain of stakeholders, not only one person. And if you cannot give that vision and this holistic picture to everybody, then it would be very difficult to sell into those large organizations.
Brilliant. Rick, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. You too. Enjoy.
So, Mael from Demia, tell me who you are and what the company is about.
Of course. So I am the head of business development at Demia. And basically at Demia, we believe that medical imaging data are really a key factor to improve research outcomes in drug development and eventually patients' outcome in real life. But the reality of using and leveraging medical imaging data is actually quite painful in this research and clinical trial context. A lot of it is about data collection, structuring, quality control, regulatory compliance, and so on. Personally speaking, it's quite painful. And so that's where we deliver value. So we have developed this AI research platform to really enable pharma companies to fully easily leverage medical imaging in the context of drug development. And we address today 2 use cases. The first one is clinical workflow management. So to really streamline the workflow of clinicians from data collection to endpoint assessments, medical imaging based endpoint assessments. And the other use case is about reusing data. So data generated by pharma companies from clinical trials in the past. Today, those data are kind of locked somewhere, very not easy to get access to. And that's where we tend to really create values, enabling easier access to those data and then leveraging analysis and so on of those data.
So you're in business development, and how long has Demia been going?
So we founded the company more than 4 years ago.
Okay.
And it's been quite a true roller coaster, I guess, like many entrepreneurial adventures, but quite rewarding, especially today, as we see more and more users, research scientists, but also clinicians and clinical professionals actually using our platform in various disease areas. So we started in orthopedics, that's where we come from. And then we expanded in other therapeutic areas, today in cardiology, oncology, and rheumatology as well.
And what are your communication priorities for your different stakeholders?
So today we really want to make sure that researchers and clinical professionals in R&D are well aware of the solution that we provide, how it actually solves some of their problems, daily problems, and have them achieve their goals, which is, I guess, better treatments for patients sooner, basically.
And you talked a bit about your journey being a roller coaster in starting the company. So what's been like the biggest challenge so far?
So I guess we are in it's not a completely new market. But these particular applications, like being able to reuse medical imaging data and clinical data as a whole, is I mean very trendy. And the goal for all the players is really build this market segment, create the market, and be able to position yourself within this market segment. And to do that, you need to do two things at the same time. One is, build, develop, validate your technical product, your platform, but also educate the ecosystem around you. And doing those two things, which are quite different activities, right? At the same time, for a very small startup, that's the challenge. We are in a much better position, not really comfortable with not so small startup anymore, but that particular challenge was something we spent a lot of time and energy and it worked, so it did hit hill.
Brilliant. Well, clearly, because you're in Basel, advice, so you
Yeah.
showing Divya off. So, where do you think the company will be, or where do you want the company to be in like 5 years' time?
So basically, we strive to be recognized and become the to-go solution for medical imaging-based research in pharma sector. So that's our goal. Yeah. So we want to make sure that we have the best solution and the best platform to deliver value to all the stakeholders, in particular the users of the platform, because that's where we deliver value, and making sure that everyone knows about it.
Yeah. What advice would you have for anyone considering starting up a biotech company?
So test your ideas as soon as possible with as many target users and target payers, because they are not always the same. And if you get traction, then go for it. Don't think too much about all the hurdles you will have to overcome over the years. Just take one at a time and go for it.
Yeah. And my last question for you, Mael,
Sure.
is what do you think is the most important thing for effective communication?
So make sure to really grasp the gist of your value proposition, and really know in details the needs of your future customers and clients and partners from a really practical standpoint. So get into the nasty details of practical things and make sure you really understand them.
Mael from Dumia, thank you so much. So you are Lucas from Exozyme. So tell me a bit about yourself and what your company does.
Great. So I'm a biochemist by training. So I spent about a decade in the lab, and I joined Exozyme roughly a year and a half ago as one of its first employees. And we are a Berlin-based startup company that was incorporated 2 years ago with VC money. And we focus primarily on the development of new machine learning tools, specifically for protein engineering. So that's where my biochemistry, protein, fandom of proteins comes in.
Mhm.
And we deploy these tools to facilitate the development of new proteins at our partners or clients' companies. For example, right now we focus on collaborations for biocatalysts for API manufacturing, but in general, the tool is quite broadly applicable. So that's where we currently stand.
And what has the journey been like in your sort of biotech career? You're one of the first employees. What's the journey been like?
So for me personally, or for
For
the
both,
company?
yeah.
For both. So maybe, let's start with the company.
Okay.
So our founders come actually from quite complementary backgrounds. So our CSO, she's also a biochemist and had a biotech experience in also developing new products also in the biopharma space. And our other technical co-founder, he comes from a machine learning background and was more working on, after his academic career in statistics, working on e-commerce problems. And they, I think, met by chance more or less,
Oh, wow.
and realized that the things that she was working on had a lot of commonalities with the challenges in protein engineering, where you often have small data sets and you're trying to learn a lot from kind of limited data sets and go quickly to something that is better, extrapolate quickly. So, and the third founder, someone with primarily a business background. So I think there was, a good amount of happenstance involved in that. And then they started to think about how to develop these ideas and talk to a lot of different potential parties that could be interested in such a tool. And for me personally, I did a PhD and postdoc studying enzyme mechanisms. So I was mostly interested from that direction in these kind of fields. But I then moved to biopharma strategy consulting after my academic positions, which was primarily working with smaller companies in the early stage of finding the right molecules for the right indication and figuring out all of these initial considerations that need to be made when embarking on such an endeavor. And when I came across Exazyme, I knew the CSO back from my academic research, and we got into a discussion. I got quite excited about it. So that's how these two paths then came together.
And the rest is history.
And the rest is history. Exactly. Yeah.
How long has the company been going and how long have you been working there?
So the company was incorporated in 2022. Before that, the founders were working on these Exist founder stipends that are based in Berlin at the Free University. And I have joined Exazyme a year and a half ago. So
Okay. And what are your communication priorities for different stakeholders?
yeah, I think it's quite diverse, right? So maybe let's start with the partners and customers, since that's closest to my own experience, and that's my main task in the company, right? To translate the capabilities of these new machine learning tools for people who are primarily working in the lab and trying to actually make these proteins work in the assays and setups that are done. So I think it can be quite challenging to communicate the possibilities, but also the caveats in comparison to what has been done traditionally in these approaches, right? It's also for me not always clear what the current paradigm in a lab that does protein engineering is. So if you'd ask 10 people, you get, 10 different approaches. So it's also a bit of an art. And then it's not only, what are the new things that I can do with these machine learning tools, but also how can I integrate them maybe in what I'm already doing? That's for me the priority and challenge to get this right? To highlight these new possibilities, but also the caveats where it might make sense to maybe also leverage the old methods like, hypothesis-driven engineering and so on. Then I think for maybe the investors, and that's a bit more distant from my direct experience. So I think that's more about explaining the challenges and maybe particular milestones that are important to move forward in the biotech space, right? Where it's often very data-driven, the barriers to entry can be very high. And so basically what you need to show before you can really, sell a project maybe might not be directly evident to maybe someone who's not spent some time in the field. So I guess that's my hypothesis. Internally, it's a combination of these. So as I said, we have biochemists, but we also have machine learning engineers. So they often speak, somewhat different languages. So, but I think bringing that together is also part of or the value that we provide to learn how to bring these two worlds together and, get the most out of it.
Absolutely. Be the bridge to those barriers.
Exactly.
So what do you think has been the biggest challenge in the startup journey so far for the company?
So I haven't been around for the very, very early days, but I think it's also true from that part is in kind of navigating on the one hand that you have maybe a tool or machine learning tool that can be quite broadly applied, right? So protein engineering is a technique that can be applied across, biopharma, biologicals, but also as enzymes for API manufacturing, but also in industrial biotechnology. We've been talking to agri-tech companies and so on. So in principle, you have, since we are in Basel, like a Swiss Army knife, right? But then of course, you need to focus for business reasons, right? So you can build your proof of concept and, the hard validation only with a limited number of shots. So we have been primarily focused on enzymes due to these reasons. So navigating these complexities of the market. So there are all these different people and companies that use this technique, and who could we actually, provide the most value with what we provide. I would say is one of the big challenges to find the right people and then, explain well how that could work with such a new solution. It's also getting in if you don't, if you're a newcomer to this field, it's also not a huge space, right? So people know each other. That can sometimes also be a bit intimidating. Yes.
Okay. So where do you want the company to be in 5 years' time? When we're working in it, where do you think it will be in 5 years' time?
So right now it's still kind of early days with using these tools, right? So there's a lot of unknowns that we also have to navigate with our partners, but the goal is definitely to provide kind of the go-to solution for machine learning assisted protein engineering, right? And to be a major player in the market of providing these kind of services as a kind of tool maker. And then, of course, as I already alluded to, it would be great to also expand across modalities, right? So for business reasons, we focused on enzymes mostly, but in principle, that could be much more broadly because the innovation that we have done is primarily on the kind of algorithmic or machine learning side, right? So it could, in principle, enable a lot of different modalities in that sense. Yeah.
Brilliant. So what advice would you have for people considering starting up a biotech startup? And I guess in your very unique lens of working as one of the first employees in the startup, what advice would you have for other people thinking about starting their own company?
I think one of the most common traps is to be enamored with a particular solution or technology, right? And I think it's really important to be very critical with these kinds of ideas because it's, I think, easy to get carried away with kind of what potential this has, but then you really need to have the use cases and you have to have the early use cases and the early proof of concept. It's important to go into a lot of depth with these ideas and, do as much talking to people who are actually working in the particular domain that you maybe have an idea for a solution for, and really pressure test if not only this can work, but also if this can actually provide value and if it's something that people are willing to pay money for, right? So, and I think it's very important to be very critical at that stage, because I think it's easy to have a lot of ideas, but then to execute on them, that's I think the big challenge. Yeah.
Okay, and my final question for you. What do you think is the most important thing for effective communication?
I think in general, one very important consideration is to know the audience, right? So who are you talking to? If we go back to the different stakeholders, for example, right? So first of all, I think it's important to understand the other party and then to address this kind of, their interests effectively, or link what you would like to talk about to what they actually can get. So this kind of what is it in for me question, right? So so kind of understanding the audience and tailoring the message, I guess, would be my two generic answers.
Thank you very much, Lucas from Exercise.
Thank
you for
you.
joining me and enjoy BioTechX. Bettina from Julie, thank you for joining me. Tell me a bit about who you are and what Julie does.
So I'm one of the two co-founders. We're both named Bettina by coincidence. And Julie is an AI-powered app for people with chronic conditions. We gather data, identify patterns, and derive recommendations for patients.
And what has the journey been like to creating a biotech startup?
It's been a long journey. We're both serial entrepreneurs. We were joined by some medical experts, a professor from the University College London that helped us get the background that we needed. And then we built the app and try to build something that is appealing to customer. I have a consumer background. I try to build something that doesn't feel like a health app, but more like something that's fun to use. And we were able to get a first customer in the pharma industry that white labels the app as a companion app. So that's great. We're very excited.
Brilliant. And how long has the company been going then?
We've been up and about for about 4 years now. We started right at the pandemic. That's been a bit of a challenge.
Yeah,
but,
what a great time to start.
Absolutely. What else would you do in that time than this?
Brilliant. So what are the communication priorities for your different stakeholders?
For us, it's mainly getting contacts in the right industry. So that's pharma, large healthcare providers, and payers. So far, we've mainly attended conferences and reached out to the attendees of the conferences prior to that via email. We gather newsletter addresses and send us newsletters. And we try to come up with a very compelling branding that stands out, which is what we hear a lot at conferences. People come along our booth and say, Julie, wait, I've seen you somewhere. So
That's what you want people to think.
yes, exactly.
So What would you say your biggest challenge has been so far in your startup journey?
The financial crisis last year, people are not that easy in spending money, investing in startups like that. We realize the healthcare industry is a very conservative, very careful industry. They think a lot whether they should do stuff or not. And if they do, they want a lot of safety barriers to make sure things go right. Especially in the pharma industry, you make one mistake and you're out. And that makes it hard to just say, let's start small with the little pilots, let's see how things going, and then we evolve from there. That's not the way pharma works.
So where do you want the company to be in 5 years' time?
Oh, we want to be the #1 app for people with chronic conditions, like the aspirin for chronic conditions, pretty clearly.
Yeah. And what chronic conditions are you working with at the moment on the app?
We cover the 10 most prevalent, from diabetes to migraine to asthma to chronic pain. But the app is built in a very modular way. We could add another condition. Let's say you wanted to have Parkinson. I build you Parkinson in a matter of a few weeks.
Wow, what quick turnaround then
Yeah.
to get
And
these on
what
the
is
app.
important, we also cover the comorbidities, because half of the Western population has a chronic condition and 60% of these people have more than one. There are some combinations that are quite common. People with asthma tend to have an anxiety, which makes sense in a way. People with chronic pain or migraine tend to have depression because they're so frustrated about their situation. So there's a lot of these combinations going on, especially combination between a mental health issue and a non-mental health issue is a very, very common thing to exist. And there are very few companies that cover this, that take this holistic approach towards patients. Say, okay, you are not just an asthma patient, you're not just a depression patient. You are you in all its entirety. You are you where you are, how you live, how well you feel at the moment, and with these conditions. And that's what we're trying to cover.
Fantastic. So you've been at it for about 4 years now, doing a biotech startup. What advice would you have for other people thinking of starting up a biotech company?
Be courageous. You've got to be a bit mad because it's quite a roller coaster. But I'd say communication. You can't have that. If you walk along these startup booths, you see you can have the greatest product in the world. If you're unable to tell people what it does and what the benefit of it is, you're doomed.
Well, on that note, what is your top tip for effective communication?
Have a great brand identity that stands out, and take it through to the very end. Do everything you can to keep that, and be consistent in your communication, not only with, colors, that's the obvious one, but in the arguments that you use, in the story that you tell. Consistency, really penetrating 3 or 4 points over and over and over again to make them stick in people's head. In communication, they say you need to tell something 10 times before it really sticks with somebody. So if you change your arguments over and over again, you have a challenge in doing so.
Absolutely. Martina from Julie, thank you so much and enjoy BioTechX. So I'm with Alex from Data Harmony at BioTechX. So Alex, tell me a bit about yourself and what Data Harmony does.
So yeah, I'm Alex. I'm a geneticist by training. I've been working in biomedical research for the past 8 years or so, predominantly working on genome engineering tools and gene therapy applications. And for the past 10 months, me and my colleagues, Lou Primes and Joe Babbage, we've been working on a life science platform for data management, data processing, and all things data, essentially a co-pilot for data and life sciences you want. And our focus is the user experience for our clients. So enabling non-technical experts to utilize and harness the power of cloud computing, data management without any knowledge of programming or backend infrastructure. So we can also help users containerize applications, provide a user interface, and with the backend of the clouds to deploy those applications to their own customers, also enabling them to white label their own workflows. So yeah, that's us as a company in a nutshell.
Brilliant. So you're a co-founder of the company. What has the biotech startup journey been like for you?
So it started off basically, like I said, 10 months ago in December. Is that 10 months? Yeah. So we
started the same team, the same co-founders, a different startup, DataBound, which was a cloud consulting and data science consultancy. We were focusing on small and medium-sized businesses in the UK. And that firm was always working on projects. We were bootstrapping ourselves at that point, and we realized that over the past 3 years, we couldn't really scale beyond a certain point. So we had customers coming in and leaving, finishing projects, which was fairly successful, but we couldn't scale. We couldn't start this journey full time. So we decided, first of all, because we realized some customers requested the same features, same tools, for one thing, and because we really wanted to refocus our attention to life science research, which was where my heart sits. So for that purpose and the ability to access investment, we decided to build a product. So that's where Data Harmony came in, the same team, the same co-founders. So the past 10 months were basically 2 phases. The first phase was just really deep dive into market research, talking to potential customers, understanding what their pain points were. And then for the past 3-4 months, we were actually starting to build based on those pain points and insights we gather. Yeah.
And at this stage in the company, what are your communication priorities for different stakeholders?
So we have basically two different types of customers, the academics and the SMEs. And SMEs in particular, those that have just spun out of universities. For the universities, the most important aspect is actually safety and security, convincing them that our setup makes sure that their data doesn't leave the country, for instance. That's something that many are very, very particular about, which is like completely understandable. So we try to communicate from the start how, our system is set up, how we prioritize from the start their security, their data safety, and moreover, a focus on the costing. So making clear that the way we set up our system will not cost them more than we have agreed upon from the beginning, which is like something difficult to do with a cloud-based setup. Costs can skyrocket very fast. On the other hand, for small, medium-sized businesses, it's basically the ability to demonstrate that we can build things and features for them quickly. Every business will be different. Every business will want a slightly different palette of features available to them. So convincing them that we can work on a more interactive kind of basis, more like a partnership than a customer to provider kind of level. We are in this together. We aim to help them do their research. We help them deploy their own tools for research. So that's why it's more like a collaboration.
Collaborative approach
Exactly.
to SMEs. Brilliant. So what would you say has been biggest challenge in your startup journey so far?
Finding the pain points. So it's easy on a very high level to say that people like academics and non-academic researchers in the life sciences have had difficulties in managing and working with data. But to pinpoint exactly what the difficulties are has been somewhat of a challenge. And I think we've gotten to a point where with a lot of interviews, conversations, and also with some quantitative data where we also have raised quite deep understanding by a questionnaire type of analyses. That was the first phase of the journey. And now the second big difficulty is raising money to grow, because we have customers that are interested in using features that we haven't managed to build to the usability extent. So being able to work on the product development full time with a bigger team will make us grow very fast, very quickly if we have the right resources. Yeah.
So where do you want the company to be in 5 years' time?
So we see ourselves as an enabler of science. I still love everything that is related to genetics and gene therapy in particular. So I see myself and the company being a key enabler for research at various different levels, being an integrative part of the research journey for smaller companies where they gather their data on site. That data is directly transferred to our platform. We have a long-term vision for that. All the processing steps may run in automation, and then they just need to visualize the data in the way they want to do so. So that's kind of our long-term vision, why we see ourselves in, like, basically being the enabler for scientists who really like doing the lab work, really like doing the experiments, and then looking at the data, understanding the data.
Okay, so what advice do you have for people who are considering starting a biotech company?
Find people you trust to build it together, and then find a problem that you want to solve really badly. So it's gonna, if you focus on the problem, if you start to become obsessed with the problem, the way you address the problem might change over time, but that really focuses your vision on improving the customer journey. And yeah, like I said, choosing co-founders that you trust, which will become key where there are some difficulties in understanding. If there's different points of view, that's kind of key. Yeah.
Brilliant. And my final question for you, what do you think is the most important thing for effective communication?
Honesty. So of course, there's a certain part of selling your idea, making what you want to build, either what you already have or what you will build for your customer, come across in the most positive light. For that, a story of customer journeys might help. But once what you tell customers or potential clients doesn't sound reasonable, they will just not trust you and just leave the conversation. So making sure that you come across as trustworthy and someone you can work with long-term, because that's what we try to build. So we try to build long-term relationships, not just one-off interactions. We don't want to sell a product once and then be done with it, but rather build relationships that we can build upon. Yeah.
Brilliant. Alex from Data Harmony, thank you so much.
Thank you too.
So I'm with Sebastian from Alva Genomics. So Sebastian, tell me a bit about yourself and then what Alva does.
Thanks, Maria. Yeah, hello. Thanks for interviewing me. So my name is Dr. Sebastian Müller, and I'm a bioinformatician by training, which basically means analyzing and writing software for biotech or universities that dabble into sort of modern biotech innovation. So usually that requires some sort of like analysis, and that's what my company Alva Genomics does. So we take the data from biotech companies, for example, and give them a rundown on what's in there, analyzing what in software. So there's been a lot of sequencing innovations nowadays, and people are struggling to actually make sense of that. So that's where we are positioned.
What has your biotech startup journey been like?
Well, yes, bit of a roller coaster, I would say. So, which is something you kind of sign up for. It's not something with like a stable day-to-day thing. So yeah, but I really enjoy that. It's especially coming from an academic background. The whole business side was quite challenging. So that was a bit of a mouthful, but yeah, I really enjoy that. So it's a good journey. Not much sleep.
Yes. How long has the company been going?
So we founded 2020, just when the pandemic kicked in. So what's it, 24? So like 3.5 years.
So what would you say has been one of your biggest challenges during creating your startup?
It's the business side. So acquiring all this knowledge, but also finding clients. So I think this is an ongoing biggest challenge, finding the right clients. And my experience is it's all about networking, at least in the first phase. And this is quite like an element of luck involved. So and you can't really control that, but with like patience and this doing good work, like there's a like word of mouth sort of situation with your clients. If you they like what they do, they will recommend. So this is how to overcome the challenge. But yeah, it's still like getting clients and managing the expectations.
So where do you want the company to be in 5 years' time?
5 years time. So it's a small company at the moment. So I want to basically grow it into a mid-sized company. But the focus being having bioinformaticians on board that are talented and also nice to work with. So having this kind of like really nice work environment and basically being a sort of brand in the space. Oh, other than genomics, that's the place to go if you do, for example, single cell genomics. Those guys, they really know what to do. So having like this kind of like really nice environment as well as the knowledge to have a name in the field.
Brilliant. And so you're almost 4 years in. So what advice would you have for someone who's considering starting a biotech company?
I think my biggest advice would be getting a mentor, because someone who has gone through that journey recently, so not too long ago, maybe like a couple of years, 3-4 years. So someone that could be serving as a role model. Approach this person, even if it's someone you don't know yet. A lot of people are quite approachable. That's the kind of like experience I made. If you kind of genuine and honest in your approach, then people are actually happy to be mentors. And I think that's one of the key things to have in mind. That actually goes for a lot of life situations, like general career. Getting a mentor, it's very simple advice. A lot of you don't do it. Get a mentor.
Would absolutely agree with that. So my final question for you, Sebastian, is what do you think is the most important thing for effective communication?
Right. So I think apart from the obvious, which is being polite, for example, which I had a time in the UK, so that's where I learned to be polite, be a polite communicator. It's also getting to the point, which is something you learn in Germany, so based in Germany. So, and I think this is the obvious one, but one specific one is Calendly. So one of the big chores in communicating is setting, for example, meeting appointments, and Calendly is absolutely fantastic. So basically you just get your schedule out there and people can book you in, and it's absolutely fantastic. So it saves you a lot of work, and the communication becomes much more streamlined because you just have like maybe like a 10 minutes meeting and you get like a lot of information, which would otherwise be like a very long email exchange. So that would be like a non-obvious advice.
Great. Well, lovely to meet you, Sebastian from Albert Genomics. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Maria.
Okay, so I'm with Pedro from Neo Therapeutics. So Pedro, tell me a bit about yourself, what Neo Therapeutics does.
Yes. So I'm Pedro, as you said. I'm the CEO and one of the co-founders of Neo Therapeutics, with Annalise Soulier, who's kind of in the background here as well. My background was as a cancer researcher. I worked as an academic in cancer research for about 13 years. And one of the areas that I was really interested in when I was doing my research was basically all of the components that form a tumor that aren't the cancer cells. How the cancer cells interact with different components of the host, different cells that make up a tumor, different structural components that make up a tumor, and the way that they can influence the way that cancer spreads and the way that they respond to therapies. And I, as an academic, thought that this was an area that really, really needed some addressing and some innovation. And I was quite frustrated that I didn't see a lot of kind of new applications coming out of this space. And I myself wanted to start working on something that had actual real life impact. So after finishing my postdoc a few years back, I started working with a venture creation company in the UK called Deep Science Ventures to start developing new innovative ways to try to address this problem. And I think new ways to break down some of the constraints within these other components of a tumor that prevent therapeutic efficacy. And we came up with the idea of using synthetic biology to design bacterial components that can go into the tumor and break down some of these barriers directly in the tumor without affecting healthy tissues. And that's when we started Neo back in 2021, 3.5 years ago now.
Fabulous. So what has the journey been like in creating a biotech startup for you?
It's been a journey because we're not your traditional kind of biotech spin-out story, right? The majority of other biotechs out there are,
someone who's spitting out interesting technology or an interesting target that they found as part of their, academic studies. Whereas we had an idea and we had a problem that we wanted to solve, and we wanted to develop an innovative solution for that problem, which means that we basically started from scratch. So back in 2021, it was me and my co-founder in West London in a shipping container with a very kind of modest pre-seed investment and an idea and a real kind of mission to try and bring this idea to life. So, it took a little bit of time, but in 2 years we managed to go from that to having an actual team where we've developed our platform and managed to get our platform built into a couple of different therapeutic pipelines and one lead asset that we've managed to generate quite a lot of data on, demonstrating that we are actually able to do what we set out to do back in 2021.
So on that, now you've got your therapeutic pipeline. What would you say are your communication priorities for different stakeholders?
So cycling back a little bit to build up a little bit more on what we're actually doing. We're using synthetic biology to engineer bacterial components that can go into solid tumors and basically act as macroscopic Trojan horses that can break down some of the fibrotic components that you have in these tumors that prevent drugs from entering the tumor effectively, that prevent immune cells from entering the tumor effectively, and basically that make solid tumors not respond to therapies very well. So we're designing these bacteria to be basically therapeutic sensitizers. They go into the tumor, they modify the physical structure of the tumor, and then we hit these tumors with existing drugs and we get these patients to respond in cases where they currently don't, which comes with some communication challenges, particularly the fact that we have to explain to people why we believe that using engineered bacterial therapeutics is the right way to be able to achieve this. It's a completely, new therapeutic modality, and it's something that people are maybe not necessarily as used to hearing about as they are, other biologics, antibodies, cell therapies, even viruses, right? So we need to be very active and kind of being out there and explaining to people that, one, we've known the relationship between bacteria and cancer therapy since the beginning of the 20th century. So this is not a new idea. Cancer patients have been receiving bacteria as therapeutics since the 70s. Patients with bladder cancer receive injections of the BCG bacteria, and it's been always completely safe. And we have all of these strategies that we're introducing into our bacteria that we're able to do through synthetic biology to make it a completely safe, but more importantly, a very targeted and effective therapeutic modality. And being able to tell that story and being able to why we believe that this is going to make a real difference in the lives of cancer patients is incredibly important for us to be able to progress as a company.
Absolutely. So what would you say during your 3.5 years of starting Neo been your biggest challenges?
I feel almost dumb saying this because it's the cliche that everyone's going to tell you about fundraising, right?
Yeah.
We started the company in 2021, which means that by the time we had started building our data and we're ready to start fundraising, we'd actually just gone past the biotech fundraising peak, and we were just starting to hit the market dump of the last couple of years. So we were basically trying to fundraise for a company at the very early stages of the development of a completely new therapeutic idea at a time when the market was really, really difficult. So to be able to get through this was definitely, I think, our biggest challenge. We were incredibly fortunate that we were able to close a seed round at the end of last year, at the end of 2023. And with that, we grew our team and we managed to start generating some really exciting data in vivo. And we're now kind of ready to start taking the company to the next stage, to start thinking about the clinic. And at that point, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of other challenges that we will have to work on, particularly with, manufacturing of our products, but it's something that we're starting to work on now.
So where do you want the company to be in 5 years' time?
We're ambitious and
Great.
we like to move fast. So right now, our pipeline and our plan is to get an IND approval by 2026 and to start getting into patients by 2027. So where you asked me where I'm planning to be in 5 years' time, I hope that by that point we will have proved that our bacterial products are not only safe, but they're effective in actual cancer patients in breaking down these barriers to therapeutic efficacy. And I hope that at that point we're sort of actively starting to get into kind of phase 2 clinical trials and partnering with different biopharma companies, demonstrating the effect that our bacterial products can have in expanding the efficacy of a lot of different biologics in cancer patients.
Exciting. Watch this space.
I hope so.
Awesome.
Thank you.
So, what advice would you have for people considering starting a biotech company?
Go for it.
Yeah.
Just
Take the lead.
just take the lead. It kind of depends on how you're going about building your biotech company. But I think, ultimately one of the most important things that you need to think about is if you're getting into biotech because you're really trying to make a difference in healthcare, then you need to start with your patients in mind. And you need to, from a very, very early point, when you're starting to design your therapies, when you're starting to design your tools, whatever it is that you're doing, think about what's that going to look like in the current, standard of care pipelines in these patients, and think about how you can coordinate with different pharma stakeholders to make sure that that you can get into patients as effectively as possible. Because what you don't want to do is to have a brilliant idea and start like moving really, really quick into the R&D and completely leave your process development, manufacturing, CMC considerations for afterwards, and then suddenly find yourself in a position where the two just don't work together and you don't actually have a path to the clinic. That's going to be, a problem with not only you being able to achieve what you're ultimately trying to achieve, which is to bring benefit to the lives of patients, but for you to also be able to like get investment and get some traction with pharma. So start thinking about process development and manufacturing early. It's important.
Great advice.
Yeah.
Okay, my final question for you is, what do you think is the most important thing for effective communication?
I mean, I think knowing how to tell a good story is essential. Kind of don't forget that, you know, people have busy lives and people have limited attention spans. So if you want them to listen to what you have to say, you need to give them a reason to listen to what you have to say. So have a hook and get to that hook quickly and know how to tell a story that actually can be compelling to people so that they want to find out more about what it is that you want to do.
Brilliant. Pedro from Neo Therapeutics, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
If you want to find out more about the companies I interviewed today, you can head to the Malby website and find all the details on the episode page. Link is in the show notes. Also, why not come and follow us on Instagrams at Frozen Comms Podcast, find out more about this episode and the other episode that we have in the podcast. You can also join in the conversation on YouTube. Let us know what you thought of this live recording podcast and find the full episode on YouTube. Again, link is in the show notes. And finally, if you enjoyed this episode and our podcast in general, why not leave us a rating on Spotify and Apple Podcasts?